There were already clues you might have missed that foreshadowed Nobara's epic return, like this cryptic clue. When Gojo died, Nobara wasn't even shown in her sensei's afterlife send-off. And there's another clue that was easy to miss. Nobara's return was actually hinted at in the Season 2 anime ending song. Akutami shook the entire Jujutsu community when Nobara made her momentous comeback at the peak of the battle against Sukuna. So bro, where there is cope, there truly is hope. And these are the 10 hints that proved Nobara was alive all along, just waiting for the perfect moment to finally return to action. Hint number 1. We have Nobara in a suspended state of death. When Nobara's face exploded after being hit by Mahito's idol transfiguration, her status wasn't fully disclosed. I mean, when Arata and Todo arrived in Shibuya, Arata treated Nobara, but mentioned that she was likely dead. Nobara had just stopped breathing, but it hadn't been long enough to consider it over. So Arata still used his abilities to treat all her injuries, even though she appeared to have died. In case you forgot, Arata's curse technique, Painkiller, prevents existing injuries from getting worse. Although he cannot heal wounds, this was probably enough to put Nobara in a suspended state of death. That's why Arata told Yuji that Nobara's chances of surviving weren't entirely zero. Nobara's death was tough for fans to accept, like you and me, especially with Nanami's passing just a few chapters earlier. Many fans held on to the slim hope that Nobara might still make a comeback. But Gege just piled on everyone's heartbreak when he revealed in an interview at the Jujutsu Kaisen exhibition in Shibuya that he had planned to eliminate both Nobara and Nanami even before the Shibuya arc began. But you see, Gege was just playing us, May. It could be true that he planned to kill these sorcerers, and yes, they really did die, but it hadn't been long enough to lose hope for Nobara. Thanks to Arata's ability, it managed to keep Nobara in a state of just past, where her body remained in the exact condition, leaving the door open for anything to still be possible for her. Hint number 2. Another reason Nobara's death is still questioned is that it seems somewhat meaningless, as if there was no great moment tied to it. Okay, so let me explain. If you look at Nanami's death, Nobara's didn't have the same impact, especially given that she was one of the major characters. So Nanami's great moment was, as he was about to die, he saw Yuji and like a true mentor gave him encouraging final words, instead of expressing any regrets that could have burdened Yuji even more. And here's why it was a defining ending for Nanami. After that, Yuji's spirit took a massive hit, affecting his will and purpose in fighting, especially against Mahito, who had been his nemesis ever since Yuji became a sorcerer. Now don't get me wrong, what happened to Nobara was also totally devastating to Yuji. It might even have played a huge part in his development, but I think Yuji has already gone through that change when Nanami died right in front of him. It felt like Nobara's death didn't entirely add up. It was even mentioned in chapter 126 that Yuji's resolve had already reached its limit a long time ago. So why did Gege write Nobara's name in the death note? On top of that, Nanami's death had some real closure. Sure, he had regrets, like wanting to go to Malaysia or figuring out why he got back into such dangerous work. But in the end, he did his best as a sorcerer, so he was kind of at peace with it. Even Chozo and Mai's deaths had a strong impact on the series. For example, Chozo saved Yuji from Sukuna's divine flame, and Mai's death helped Maki unlock the full potential of Heavenly Restriction. But when Nobara died, we didn't get any of these great moments. Instead, we got a quick flashback that hinted at her inevitable death, more like a confirmation than adding any real depth or meaning to it. Additionally, the idea that Nobara's death was meaningless is supported by these subreddit discussions that suggest there's something off about her death. Nearly every character who has faced a significant death in the story has eventually returned in some form, whether it's through flashbacks, as a source of encouragement, or even in the afterlife. But that wasn't the case for Nobara, which suggested that her role wasn't completely finished just yet. Like how she appeared at the most crucial moment to defeat Sukuna, literally coming in clutch. Hint number 3, Nobara's weapon mysteriously disappeared. After her supposed death, her nails and hammer weren't mentioned at all. Why? I know they were just simple tools, but in case you forgot, the nails and hammer were the mediums of Nobara's curse technique. So it's possible that her technique might have been imbued in her weapon. You see, when weapons are consistently used with curse energy and curse techniques, they can eventually become curse tools. Take Nanami's blunt blade for example. It inherited his ratio technique and became his legacy after Ino took it up as his weapon during the battle with Sukuna. There's also Miwa's sword, which became a cursed weapon after being infused with curse energy over time. It's possible that Nobara's weapon has already achieved this, but if Nobara was truly dead, why weren't they using such a powerful weapon with an effective technique against Sukuna? Hint number 4, Yuji and Megumi actually knew about Nobara's situation. It was a bittersweet reunion for the trio of Yuji, Nobara, and Megumi in chapter 267, even though Megumi was still possessed by Sukuna. but that only added to the hype. I'm just wondering, Yuji didn't seem surprised at all when Nobara returned. It's almost like he was expecting her to eventually come back. But seriously, did they make all those sacrifices just for her to return? I mean, it's like all this time these sorcerers are holding their ground against Sukuna because they know they just have to wait for Nobara, like a trump card? This is what makes me think Yuji and Megumi knew Nobara was alright and simply recovering. When you think about it, even before Sukuna took Megumi's body, Yuji and Megumi didn't really talk much about Nobara back then. Going back to chapter 144, when Yuji asked Megumi what happened to Kugisaki, Megumi just looked down and didn't answer, which instantly sent Yuji into a rage. So I guess that means something really bad happened to Nobara. She may have died, but Megumi's expression wasn't like that of someone who's grieving. Instead, it was the look of someone who knew there was nothing they could do at the moment. Megumi's face was filled with agony because all they could do was wait. Also in chapter 210, Yuji said he was afraid that Hana Kurusu, aka Angel, would replace Nobara in their trio. But Megumi easily dismissed that thought and told Yuji not to be dumb. I think he was right. Stupid! If you remember, Kurusu was just helping Yuji and Megumi because she kinda had a love interest in Megumi after he saved her from the slums back when she was just a kid. So it's not like she really wanted to join their group. She was just in it for Megumi. That convo might have given away that Yuji and Megumi shouldn't be thinking about replacing Nobara because she's not dead. She just couldn't join them in the battle yet. Hint number 5. Nobara was absent from Gojo's airport send-off. Aside from the fact that her supposed death had a shallow impact, Nobara didn't receive a proper send-off like Gojo. Isn't that sus? It seems even more obvious that Nobara is alive because the sorcerers actually didn't confirm her death. Yeah, I know they didn't have much time to mourn the people who died in Shibuya, especially since Kanjaku didn't stop with his plans and kicked off the culling games right away, but Nobara wasn't even mentioned after Gojo sensei also died. And that's probably the biggest clue hiding in plain sight. Where the heck was my girl Nobara in Gojo's send-off scene? If you remember, after Gojo was sliced by Sukuna, he met his close friends and some people connected to Jujutsu High, like Geto, Nanami, Yaga, and even Riko and Misato. So if these people were there to welcome Gojo in the afterlife, why was Nobara left out? These people were important to Gojo in his life, and it's really sketchy that one of his students, whom he valued so much, wasn't there to meet him in the afterlife. And crazy thing is, even when Gojo was still alive, he didn't say anything about Nobara's death at all. Which gives us hint number 6. Gojo was silent about Nobara's fate. That's pretty shady and totally unlike Gojo since we know how much he cares about his students. When Nanami and Yaga died, Gojo was shown to have mourned them and even acted on Principal Yaga's death by killing all the members of the higher-ups. Gojo was furious that the higher-ups used his absence to eliminate any potential threats to their power, like Masamichi Yaga with his insanely powerful cursed corpse technique. When Nanami died, Gojo met with Shoko and Ijichi before his big fight with Sukuna and said, "Now it's just the 3 of us left." That might be the closest we get to Gojo acknowledging Nanami's death. And in his own way, it was him remembering his fallen friend. So if Gojo had his moments and actions regarding the deaths of Nanami and Yaga, how come he didn't have any for Nobara? Also, right after Gojo talked about Nanami, Shoko mentioned someone who wasn't fully recovered yet. Could it be that Shoko was able to save Nobara and she was already talking about Nobara and her role in the future? It's not impossible since we've already seen that the reverse curse technique can work like a defibrillator, just like when Yuta revived Yuji after momentarily killing him. And as you know, Shoko is a top tier sorcerer when it comes to reverse curse technique. Actually, when Nobara and Gojo died, a Jump Fiesta interview with Gege back in 2019 became a legit mind-boggling puzzle. And I just have to include it because Gege played us all for real, again. In this interview, Gege gave us a glimpse of the ending for Gojo and his trio students. First, either one lives and 3 will die, or second, only one dies and 3 will live. When Nobara died, it seemed like the answer was clearly the second case. But after Gojo's death, fans quickly shifted their focus to the first possibility, sparking a huge debate over who would die between Yuji and Megumi, while Nobara's fate was somehow overlooked. Likely because the final showdown with Sukuna was left with just Yuji and Megumi. Then Gege flipped everything on its head when Nobara made an epic comeback surprising all her homies, including me and you. Well played, Gege, well played. Did you know that Nobara's return was also hinted at in one of the ending credits of the anime? Hint number 7. There's an Easter egg in Season 2 anime ending song. There was a brief moment where Nobara was shown beside a pile of box cases with katakana characters printed on them. These characters actually translated to the word pop, meaning to go somewhere for a short time, often without notice, which could be directly related to what happened to Nobara. So it was like she didn't actually die, but just had to go somewhere, probably to fully recover from all her injuries. Hint number 8. Nobara's death went strangely unspoken. Now when Nobara wasn't around, it wasn't just Gojo who kept quiet about her fate. No one's talking about her at all. Aside from that silent understanding between Yuji and Megumi in chapter 144, it's as if Nobara was completely forgotten. That's some cold treatment, no? The only time Nobara was mentioned again was when Todo came back as reinforcement in the battle against Sukuna. Well, that's because of hint number 9. Resonance will be Sukuna's downfall. It was quite intriguing when Todo didn't want to reveal his plan with Mei to Yuji, and Mei added that it was because of resonance, which could be the game changer against Sukuna. In chapter 259, Mei and Todo had planned to team up to help people trapped within Sukuna's domain escape. Todo would use his boogie woogie on Mei's crows to teleport their friends away from Sukuna, but they didn't want to include Yuji in their strategy. At first I thought it meant that Sukuna's connection with Yuji back when her boy was still a vessel could spoil all their plans. But the thing is, if Sukuna had access to Yuji's subconscious, why didn't the king know about these sorcerer's plans during the battle in the Culling Games? It was also shown multiple times that Sukuna was learning about Yuji and the other strategies as the fight went on. So the resonance Mei and Todo were talking about was actually Nobara's curse technique. But the question is, why did they keep it from Yuji? I think they just wanted Yuji to focus on holding his ground in the battle against Sukuna. Yuji already had a lot on his plate. Besides figuring out how to defeat Sukuna, he was also bearing the pain of losing comrades in the midst of the battle. Like when Higuruma and Chozo died, leaving all their hopes in Yuji's hands. That's why Big Bro even hid the ultimate plan from Yuji. Even Yuta knew about it and said they were going to execute the plan before fighting Sukuna. This means that these sorcerers were all considering Nobara's powerful curse technique as the grand finale to ultimately defeat Sukuna. Giving us hint number 10, Gojo concealed Sukuna's last finger. They intended to use resonance on Sukuna's last finger, which Gojo had actually hidden probably since the very beginning. So yeah, Nobara was gone due to massive plot armor. Like bro, if she had been alive all along, defeating Sukuna would have been much easier. That's why she was kept hidden. Seems like she could have ended the series all by herself. To finally take down Sukuna, they carefully crafted a plan that involved Nobara's curse technique, and surprisingly, Sukuna's final finger. In the Yuta and Yuji combo against Sukuna, Yuta gave the king a taste of his own medicine, or literally his own blood, using cleave against him. In chapter 222, Sukuna had consumed all but one of his fingers, which Urame couldn't find. Sukuna believed that Gojo had hidden the last cursed object. Since Yuta was one of the best bets to fight against Sukuna, the king even fell for Yuta's bluff about consuming the missing finger, which allowed Yuta to use Sukuna's technique. It turned out Yuta had actually consumed Yuji's fingers instead, allowing him to use cleave. This sneaky yet simple act fooled Sukuna and ultimately led to his defeat at the hands of the prodigy sorcerers, Yuji and Nobara.